How would you like a 15% discount to my daily email, the stack of stuff, the show notes, discounts to the conference, all of that? All you need to do is text the word show to 33777. You'll get the annual subscription with a 15% discount to my daily email. You'll get the stack of stuff, the links to the show notes, discounts to the conference, and so much more. All you have to do is text the word show, SHOW, to 33777. Text show to 33777.
Welcome to the Eric Erickson Show podcast, Hour 1.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome. It's Eric Erickson here across the United States of America, live from Kiowa Island, the second day here at this conference. Conservatives, it's been fun to speak at, and I was supposed to go home tomorrow, but with a hurricane coming to the southeast, looks like it's going to be a big one. My flight got moved, and I just didn't want to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, so I rearranged everything, and we'll skip golf this afternoon to get to the airport. I did get to play golf with Vice President Pinch yesterday, and I got to tell you guys, so I've known him for a very long time. And I also, the guy we were playing with, I've known for a very long time. And the guy we were playing with was like, "Oh, Mr. Vice President, that was a good shot. Oh, sir, that was an excellent hit. Sir, this, sir, that. Mr. Vice President, this." And I finally looked at my buddy and I was like, "Greg, this is Mike from Indiana, private citizen of the United States. If you're going to keep treating him like that, you need to refer to me as God Almighty." Pence said, "This is why they keep me around. I make them all humble." In any event, welcome. I am a remote location, Kiowa Island, on the hotel Wi-Fi. So if I sound a little crackly, that's it. And I must begin with an apology from yesterday's show, where I referred to I-80 instead of I-90 going through Montana, and every trucker in America called the program and said I clearly didn't know what I was talking about. And the reality is I'm realizing that I'm getting old man eyes. And I thought that the 90 was an 80 on the map when I was looking because it was tiny, and I couldn't figure out how to magnify it. So there you have. That's my excuse. That's my excuse. So please stop calling my assistant to tell me I don't know my interstates. I was looking at the map. I just couldn't read it. It was too small. But I appreciate how many truckers in America listen to this program across America. Now, the phone number is 877-973-7425. If you text Eric, E-R-I-C-K, to 33777, you can get the show notes, the live stream, the podcast, all that. We've got 42 days. And I want to kind of give you some background. So I'm at this conference for Advancing American Freedom. It is the Pence think tank that has been set up to defend essentially traditional conservatism, as the Heritage Foundation's kind of embraced this wild populism and tariffs and stuff like that. There have been some great speakers here. What I want to point out, though, is some of the polling briefings that we have gotten and that I've had some private conversations with some folks. And one of those should be very encouraging if you're a Trump supporter with 42 days left. It looks like, based on internal polling, that Trump is going to be fine in North Carolina, even as Mark Robinson's campaign continues to implode. Trump has now abandoned Mark Robinson. You know, last week he said he would stand by his man. Robinson stayed in the race. Now it's too late for Robinson to get out of the race, and Trump said, I'm done with him. Republican Governors Association has pulled out of North Carolina. They're pulling their funding. But the consensus of Republicans now is that Trump's going to be fine in North Carolina. Robinson is toast. There's no way he's going to win, but other Republicans will be fine. Now, Pennsylvania is the hard one. The problem with Pennsylvania is one pollster who is one of the very best pollsters is doing a lot of private polling. So it's not for public. You're not going to see this polling. And the reason he's done 8 different private polls in Pennsylvania is the number 48. Donald Trump is not crossing 48% in his different polls, expansive polls of likely voters. Now, here's the issue with these likely voters. He is surveying voters who voted in 2016 and 2018. So these are the most likely voters. He's also doing separate surveys of low propensity newly registered voters. And here's the thing. This is the encouraging part for Donald Trump in Pennsylvania. The Republican voter registration rolls are growing and narrowing the margin. There's an increase of Republican registered voters in Pennsylvania, a decrease of Democratic registered voters in Pennsylvania. But Donald Trump can't get more than 48%. 48% is what he got when he lost in 2020. So he can't get more than that. But as the polling margin narrows between Republicans and Democrats, that 48% may wind up being okay. We're not sure. But there's other polling now that's bad in Pennsylvania. If Trump sweeps the Sun Belt, he's going to win Arizona. He's probably going to win Georgia. He's probably going to win North Carolina. He still needs to win Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, or Michigan. The campaign seems to be giving up on Michigan, which leaves Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania has the most. Both sides want to win it. And the Harris team is now going into rural Pennsylvania in ways Democrats have not in the past. That Harris can advance into rural areas is not a good sign for Trump. 42 days left in this campaign. Now, why does this matter? Because, as I wrote in my morning email today, Republican voters think the Democrats are an existential threat to them. Democratic voters believe Republicans are an existential threat to them. Independent voters hate everybody. Independent voters hate Donald Trump. Independent voters hate the Biden-Harris administration. But Kamala Harris herself is an enigma. It is why Kamala Harris is doing so few interviews. It may frustrate you. You may not like it. You may think that she's cheating by not doing interviews. But whether you like it or not, it's a legitimate campaign strategy that Kamala Harris has decided to deploy. Knowing the American press corps is biased in her favor, she can get by without asking all the tough questions being asked, if there's no pressure built by Republicans to call her out on this. And her surrogates are not doing herself much favor. This, for example, is Chris Coons. He is the senator from Connecticut who was the chair, he's Delaware. And he was the chair of the Biden campaign. He's now the co-chair of the Harris campaign, having, not a fantastic moment on CNBC. If I can get this loaded off the hotel Wi-Fi, where he essentially says...
One of the things people wonder is, why is it necessary to chart a new path forward and to turn the page for Vice President Harris? Why not embrace... I would imagine it's because Americans... recent New York Times poll, Americans still don't feel like it's a great economy, and they prefer Trump. Maybe it's narrowing a little, but they prefer Trump and the way he managed the economy more than the current administration.
You're right, Joe. It is narrowing. The gap between Harris and Trump on who do you believe will chart a better economic future for us has narrowed quite a bit, by half. Part of it is that Americans, when you ask the question, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago, many Americans misremember just how bad the economy was 4 years ago and how strong our economic recovery from the pandemic has been. And next year, the biggest fight is going to be over taxes. Lots of folks don't remember the details of the very complex TCJA, or Tax Cut and Jobs Act, fight of 2017. A lot of those provisions expire next year. And so early next year, Congress and the president are going to have to roll up our sleeves, sit down and hammer out what's it going to look like for the next 5 years? What are we going to do in terms of spending through the tax code? What incentives will there be? Joe Biden made a promise he wouldn't raise taxes on anyone making less than $400,000, and he's kept that. Donald Trump is promising he's going to impose a 20% tariff. That's a tax on every imported product.
Go back to 2000.
That's a national sales tax.
Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Many Americans misremember, and they're going after Trump on tariffs, which is kind of wild that the Democrats have the stronger argument that a tariff will amount to essentially a national sales tax. And they're right on that. I can't dispute that. It would be intellectually dishonest to try to dispute that, because a tariff is largely paid for by the consumers of the United States. It's not paid for by the countries that the tariff is imposed on. It's paid by the importers from those countries who pass it on to consumers. But this telling Americans they misremember, they don't misremember. They remember COVID, and they have never blamed Donald Trump for COVID. They don't blame Donald Trump for the economic fallout from COVID. And before COVID, the economy was working. The economy was working for people. We didn't have inflation. We didn't have high grocery prices. We didn't have high gas prices. And people remember that. And it is lecturing for the Democrats to try to tell us that somehow or another that this is people are misremembering. He goes on. Let me play you a little more of this conversation because it did not really go well for him. In his argument over Kamala Harris's vision for the United States and the economy.
Let me ask you a different question. Do you think that the American public, voters, many of whom, by the way, have the opportunity to vote right now?
Yes.
I mean literally right now.
Early voting has already started in many key states.
Do you believe that they deserve to know specific details about her economic plan? Should you know what your tax rate is going to be, or at least what she believes your tax rate should be, before you go to the polls? Should you know what the regulatory sort of regime in her perfected world would look like? I think these are sort of singular important questions, and you could say maybe you're not supposed to know these things, but I think that's what people want to understand.
She's laid out a broad vision for what are her priorities, and I think your average American voters got to look at the chaos, the unpredictability, the sort of careening around the field of the former president, and a
internet Wi-Fi basically goes on to say that she's laid out this broad vision, and people can take the broad vision and interpret it how they want, which is, again, not a compelling selling point for Kamala Harris right now, that they don't want to go into these details. But for now, they can get away with those details. For now, they can get away with this sort of stuff because there's really no pushback from an American media that doesn't want Donald Trump. So Donald Trump's got to do the full pushback. We've got 42 days. This came up last night at a conversation with a Trump supporter who remains frustrated by this. In that debate with Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, when Donald Trump decided to argue about the crowd size of his rallies, do you remember what the question was? It was about immigration. And he had the opportunity to focus on immigration and make that the issue, and instead decided to argue about crowd size. That is the frustration that his supporters have with him right now, is his ability in 42 days to just talk about the economy, talk about immigration. Economy and immigration, maybe even foreign policy, which was a huge selling point. Now, he's doing that to some degree today. He's been in Pennsylvania. Listen to this conversation he had with a shop owner in Pennsylvania.
Best crew in the world.
So how do you do against the big stores? How do you do?
You know, I'm very proud because every year we've been up, except for the last 3 years because of this inflation.
Yeah.
It's exactly what you said. The prices are up, but our sales are down. So we've had to get super creative in how we use our space to try.
So prices go up and yet your sales are down.
Yeah. So it's been brutal just to try to. Thankfully, I have a great crew, great staff. My family. We work
How long
together.
has this been open?
We've been in business 25 years.
Wow.
We bought this store where you're standing there has been a grocery store since 1929.
Wow, that's great.
It's the 1920s. This place has been a grocery store. Prices up, sales down. Everything was good until 3 years ago. See, for Chris Coons of Delaware to tell people that you're misremembering it, no, you're not. No, you're not. The lecturing left, and remember, the left was telling us that employment was super good, and they had to revise it down 1 million jobs. This is the Trump angle here. Harris wants to be an enigma into which you can pour your hopes, dreams, and ambitions without any examination of who she actually is. Donald Trump has the policies on his side. Kamala Harris is trying to get the vibes on her side. If she can make this an emotional election, she's going to do just fine. If Donald Trump can make it about the economy and immigration in these last 42 days, he's going to be fine. It all comes down to Pennsylvania. He said he was going to have J.D. Vance camp out in Pennsylvania. At this point, he probably needs to do it, and he'll win.
Blinds.com Cyber Monday Last Chance is happening now. Don't miss out on up to 45% off site-wide. A Blinds.com design expert can help you make the perfect selection on your schedule. We can handle everything from measure to your whole home installed for one low cost. With over 25 million windows covered, Blinds.com is the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings. Save up to 45% site-wide, plus a free professional measure right now at Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Yes, you can. Call in, be a part of the program, 877-973-7425. This is if you're east of the Mississippi, my apologies to those of you who are west of the Mississippi listening right now. This is kind of hyper-specific, but as you'll understand, it actually is necessary. My kid called me yesterday, and he says, Dad, I think we're going to be out of school on Friday. I said, why? He says, hurricane. What hurricane? He says, well, there's going to be a hurricane. And I looked, there's no hurricane. Well, turns out there is now. It is a very rapidly developing storm. It is currently south of Cuba, and it is expected, according to the computer models, to come up through the Florida northern part of the Big Bend region. You have the Florida Panhandle. And then there starts to be this bend in Florida as the peninsula forms going south. The Apalachicola Bay Area, where they've been hit before, and this storm is expected to come in east of Apalachicola, due south of Tallahassee, and go up into Georgia, where I am, and run through Albany, Macon, Atlanta, head up into Chattanooga, according to the storm, get all the way up into Kentucky, all the way potentially heading up into Illinois, and then carving over to Dayton, Ohio, where I've got a listening audience. So this hurricane, by then it'll be a tropical depression, but it's going to be a big storm. All of you listening right now, your television sets may go out because you got satellite and hurricane cloud cover's too thick for the satellite signal to penetrate, or the lines go down and so you don't have power or you can't get cable, but you can get radio. You need to make sure you get some batteries because this is a massive, rapidly developing storm. Put it this way. I was supposed to leave here tomorrow. Delta is being very proactive. I'm flying. I could have driven, but just wear and tear and everything else. My sister was like, you should just let Delta take you. So instead of flying later in the morning, they moved my flight to right at 6 a.m., and just because of they're trying to put their travel scheduling in place with the storm and everything. So I was going to have to get up at 4 a.m. to get there because I got to check a bag. And so I was like, can we move it to today? So I'm going to forego some golf this afternoon in Kiowa and get to the airport. The flight's at like 6:30, so I'll get home. I mean, I'll be home by 9 o'clock tonight, thankfully, but it is all because of this hurricane. So, again, in all seriousness, if you are east of the Mississippi, this storm is going to go up basically towards the northern end of the Mississippi River Valley, and you're going to want to be paying attention because it is a rapidly developing storm that is going to be very strong by the time it hits the Gulf Coast. And I'm assuming my Braves game is going to get canceled that I'm supposed to go to. In any event, with banks collapsing, with the economy the way it is, with people worried about a recession, Swiss America has been the trusted leader in precious metals for 40 years, and they've been warning people about a secret war on cash. If you're interested in safeguarding your hard-earned cash from the secret war, they've got a free report for you, completely free, on this war on cash. They're rated A+ by the Better Business Bureau. Swiss America can educate you on protecting your assets in this report. You should read it. It takes less than 15 minutes to read. I've got it, and you'd be amazed at the efforts the government goes through to track your cash purchases. You can read this. It's going to save your retirement and finances. You get a free copy by calling or texting 800-289-2646. The all-out war on cash includes digital forms of currency. It's growing. So read the report, The Secret War on Cash. Just mention my name at 800-289-2646. All you have to do is text that number, 800-289-2646. What do you text? Well, Eric, E-R-I-C-K. You can also call them and give them my name, 800-289-2646. The report is completely free. Message and data rates may apply. Greetings. It's Eric Erickson here. The phone number is 877-973-7425. Should you wish to be on the program, I am delighted to have you. Now... wow. Hang on. I got a screenshot. That's just too great. Okay. All right. Nope. Not gonna say anything. Not gonna say anything. I have been asked to talk about a topic by a number of people because it's something I used to specialize in when I was running campaigns, and I've mentioned it to you guys before. I want to begin saying this to you. Talking to here at this conference, the number of analysts, the number of pollsters, got some behind the scenes polling with some of the Trump campaign people, and they feel pretty good about where things stand right now. There are some caveats. Pennsylvania is one of the difficulties. They do feel good if you're just tuning in. Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, even the Democrats are beginning to believe that Donald Trump, despite the Mark Robinson stuff in North Carolina, that Donald Trump's going to be able to win those states. It's Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan that are the problems for Trump, and Pennsylvania is the big one. And this is a completely tied race. Now, I understand that whoever loses, that person and their supporters are going to say the race was stolen. But this is a tied race. 2020 was not really a tied race. 2016 was not a tied race. We haven't really seen a tied race in this country except in Bush versus Gore in 2000 that came down to 534 votes in Florida. This is a very tied race. Not only is it tied nationally, it is tied in these swing states, the Electoral College map. It is kind of wild to see. We're living in a very divided country. Republicans do not understand why Democrats like Harris. Democrats do not understand why Republicans like Trump. They hate each other because of their political supports and passions. And independent voters hate everybody. Independent voters used to be Republican voters who didn't like the Republican Party. And now independent voters are as much Democratic voters who hate the Democratic Party as they are Republican voters who hate the Republican Party. And independent voters are going to decide the election. In particular, the undecided independent is a voter who is he's voting based on emotion. He's voting based on vibes, honestly. And I hate that word. The independent voter who is undecided doesn't have a top issue. They want to feel loved and respected. And in a tied race, where the voters who will decide the race want to feel loved and respected, the ground game is what matters. And unfortunately, for Republicans right now in a very tied race, the Trump campaign early on, because of their legal woes and funding bills, funding issues, lawyer bills, decided they needed to outsource their ground game to third-party groups. And I want to be very clear with you here. Right now, the Trump campaign is telling you that's not true. They're saying publicly it's not really true. They have a ground game. The reality is their internal ground game is very small. They're doing it so they can say they have one, but they actually are mostly relying on outside entities. In the west of the Mississippi, Charlie Kirk's Turning Point USA action is doing door-knocking campaigns, and no one in the Trump campaign feels very good about them. In the east, it is America PAC, which has now decided because of the failures of Charlie Kirk's campaign, get out the vote effort, they're going to do the West as well. America PAC is funded by Elon Musk. It is being run by Ron DeSantis' old campaign team. Janera Peck and Phil Cox, I think are their names, who are running it. They've been making some shakeups, and one of the concerns with an America PAC is that some of the consultants involved are self-dealing. They're referring contracts to their own companies so that they get additional commissions and kickbacks, and they may not be the best teams. Kamala Harris is doing everything in-house. To give you an idea of this, go back to 2008 and how effective Barack Obama was. Now, the odds of John McCain getting elected in 2008 were pretty slim anyway, because historically, presidential campaigns do not get more than 8 years. Ronald Reagan to George H.W. Bush was historically anomalous. That had happened very few times in American history. So the odds were Barack Obama was going to win. But what Obama did is, let me explain to you how consultants work. And I couldn't do political consulting because I really just couldn't look myself in the mirror doing stuff, particularly as a lawyer, given legal ethics. But a campaign consultant typically also is a partner in a mail house and is also a partner in an ad firm. So the campaign consultant refers the campaign to their mail design shop. And while the consultant is paid money monthly by the campaign pays the mail shop a commission. So you may be able to send out a mail piece for 30 cents on the dollar, but it gets marked up to 60 cents on the dollar. And so the the mail shop is taking 30 cents of every mail piece. You're doubling the price of the mail piece. And then the consultant gets 10% of that. And then you go to the ad firm. The consultants place the ads on television. There's a gross and a net price. And the consultants mark up a commission, and when they place the ad, they come to the campaign and they say it's going to cost you $50,000 to run this commercial in this market. It actually only costs $30,000 to run the ad, but they've marked it up by $25,000. That's their commission. When I was a campaign consultant, I was running through my law firm, and legal ethics would prevent me from doing this to people who were my clients. So I didn't charge the ad commissions. I didn't charge the mail commissions. So I didn't make as much money as my friends were on the outside of it. But my clients mostly won because I was saving them money to do other things. What's happening with the ground game is you use a consultant who then pays a company to hire people to go knock on doors. Turns out the consultant has a commission-based ownership interest in the outside consulting firm, and so they're getting a kickback through the outside consulting firm, and the candidate doesn't even know it. The consultant's under no obligation to disclose it. You're just referring them to a competent company where there's an ownership interest, and you don't have to disclose it. On radio, if I promote something that I'm getting a beneficial financial interest in, I got to tell you about it. It's against the law to do otherwise. Campaigns, you don't have to do that. And rich candidates get bled dry. Elon Musk, I have a feeling, is getting bled dry. But America PAC is actually showing up at people's houses. I don't have a relationship with them. I don't particularly care for the people involved. I'm not an Elon Musk fan. I actually think he's overrated and not as great a person as people on the right seem to think he is these days. But his America PAC is showing up. In many cases, they're doing door knocking. My buddy Drew, who lives in rural North Carolina, said they showed up at his house and they knocked on the door. Now, oftentimes there are two things they do. There's door knocking and there's lit dropping. Lit dropping is they drop literature, they put it on your door handle. They don't actually make contact with the human. And that is mostly what America PAC is doing. It's not that effective, but it's a, hey, we've been in your neighborhood, want to remind you to vote sort of thing. They target Republicans with a propensity to vote to remind them the election's coming. Door knocking is they show up, they have a sense of what your big issue is, and they want to remind you to vote. They want to see, do you need to get an absentee ballot? Can they help you fill out the form? I got the form right here. I can get it processed for you. Make sure you get your absentee ballot. I'll come back when your absentee ballot comes in to make sure we can get it to the mail for you. That's essentially ballot harvesting. That's what the door knockers do. The Harris team is doing door knocking. They're showing up at people's houses with voter registration forms or absentee ballot forms. They're helping people fill them out to do early voting. They're putting in their information. So in states where they report back absentee ballot processing, they know the absentee ballot's in the mail. They show back up at the person's house. They make sure they've got it cast. They follow up with them. They may even take it to the mailbox regardless of the law. Remember, the law on ballot harvesting, and this is something that tripped up people who wanted to believe 2020 was stolen. The law on ballot harvesting is it is against the law in many states to harvest ballots. That is, to show up at people's houses and say, let me take your absentee ballot and I'll deliver it for you. That's against the law. It is not against, it doesn't invalidate the ballot, however. Just because you gave your ballot to someone to take to the Board of Elections does not render your vote ineligible to be counted. It's the person who collected the ballot that broke the law, not you. People mess that up. People are like, look at the ballot harvesting. That's illegal. No. You can call it cheating and you can call it illegal, but it doesn't invalidate the election. The vote still gets to count. So the Harris team is willing to play the odds that they're not going to get caught because they're targeting Democrats who aren't going to report them, and they're doing this. The Trump side of this isn't actually doing absentee ballot collection and early vote collection. They're just knocking on doors, dropping off literature saying, remember to vote. Which do you think is going to be more effective? That's part of the problem here. The ground game matters. Now, there's software that the campaigns use, which is genius software. There are various forms of it. A buddy of mine who is involved on the Republican side of things runs a company called Campaign Sidekick. I have seen his in action, and I'm biased. One, he's a friend of mine, longtime friend, but two, I kind of helped him with the idea early on, and he ran with it. It is totally his. I can't really take credit for it. It's a genius system. So here's what happens. Your door knocker knocks on a door. You use this software to say, I want to knock on all of the likely voters in this neighborhood who are neither Republican nor Democrat. They're independent. This software uses an algorithm based on the TV shows these people watch. It's all commercial data available for sale. Their newspaper subscriptions, their magazine subscriptions, their memberships and commercial entities that sell their stuff. So you pull up and the algorithm says, this guy looks like a gun owner. He's in the NRA. He subscribes to Field and Stream. He watches hunting shows on TV. So you knock on the door. You're there to talk about the Second Amendment. And you got a little script. And the GPS on the phone knows you're at that person's door, knows how long you've been at that person's door, and so knows you've made voter contact and checks the box. So that the person who's doing the door knocking can't just walk through a neighborhood and not actually knock on doors. The GPS system tracks them, so you know for sure that the person's doing the door knocking. And it gives you a route so that you're never walking back and forth. You're walking a single path through a neighborhood to make it more efficient. You're only going to the people who are likely to vote, who you want to target. The software is genius. There are multiple ones that work. Campaign Sidekick, I don't have a business interest in it. I know it. I've seen it in operation. I would love it if I could use it for radio in some way. It's really cool. The other big divide in the ground game is paid versus volunteer. The Harris team is using a massive number of paid people to then bring in volunteers who are passionate about Harris, mostly college students, to do the door knocking, supplemented with the paid people. Some of the Republican efforts are they've just gone out and they've hired people who need jobs. There's a big difference. A volunteer is passionate but may not be able to work. A paid person may be able to work but may not be passionate. The ideal and the optimal solution is to find volunteers who are passionate about the candidate and then put them on the payroll so it is their job. So their job is to carry out their passion. And that's happening in some states on both sides, but a lot of it is not happening. They're relying on volunteers who may or may not be able to show up. The Trump campaign is having to reconfigure its Pennsylvania outreach effort because it was relying on volunteers who weren't actually knocking regularly on doors. And I have heard that their July and August door knocking in Pennsylvania was terrible. I've been given numbers. They are quite low. I won't repeat them because it would give away the source. But the Trump campaign has had to reconfigure that operation after Labor Day and is now using paid people who are passionate about Trump to knock on the door in Pennsylvania. That's what they got to do. It is a tied race, ladies and gentlemen. It is a tied race. It is the ground game that's going to win it. And frankly, Kamala Harris benefits because she's put more money into a paid ground game operation in all the swing states. The issues, however, work for Donald Trump. And if you're passionate enough for him, you may not need someone to remind you to go vote. You're just going to go vote for him anyway because the election's the dominant conversation. We got 42 days to see how this plays out. I got to tell you, I got a new Eden Pure Thunderstorm, and it is got a plasma option to it, and the plasma option actually kills the bacteria and the viruses that are floating in the air. It doesn't just eliminate odors now. It's incredible. And again, I'm looking at it right now in my travel bag. I can hold this thing in my hand. It's now silver. It's not black. It's even more compact than it used to be. It's fantastic. You can buy one, get one free if you go to EdenPureDeals.com and put in Eric Bogo, ERICKBOGO. The plasma actually cleans the air. It doesn't just deodorize the air with the ozone. It cleans it as well, getting rid of the viruses and getting rid of the bacteria, getting rid of the mold and mildew spores. It locks onto them. The plasma ions lock onto it and weighs these things down, the viruses, the bacteria, and they fall out of the air, so they can't circulate. it actually, that's the science behind it. It works. And then the ozone ions latch onto the odors and neutralize the odors. And it's a 1-2 combo. And you don't have to get a filter, even the new one. You don't have to get a new filter subscription. It just works. You can buy one, get one free. Buy 3, get 3 free. Buy 5, get 5 free. EdenPureDeals.com. EdenPureDeals.com. The discount code is Eric Bogo, ErickBogo. Eric Bogo, this week only, EdenPureDeals.com. Use the discount code Eric Bogo. Buy one, get one free. This hour of the program brought to you by First Liberty Building and Loan. Wherever you are nationwide, if you're in charge of the finances of a business, if you're buying a building or if you're building a building, if you're buying a franchise, if you need a heavy equipment loan and you need to move fast, First Liberty makes their own decisions and they move quick. Go to FirstLibertyGA.com, FirstLibertyGA.com. Spend 10 minutes with them. See if you're a fit for them. See if they're a fit for you. I got to bring you up to speed on the Mark Robinson situation in North Carolina. His campaign team yesterday, they all abandoned him. Today, the Republican Governors Association has announced they're pulling all money out of North Carolina. Likewise, all the major Republican governors, including Governor Kemp in Georgia, Youngkin, Virginia, DeSantis in Florida, and others, they've all pulled their endorsements. And even Donald Trump, who last week said he intended to stand by Mark Robinson and fight, has abandoned him, saying that he no longer can endorse Mark Robinson. Republicans, had you forced him out of the race last week, you could have put a new candidate in and rejuvenated that campaign. Instead, you waited until it was too late to do this. All of you people who say that Democrats will stand by their man, they shoved Joe Biden out of the race because they were desperate to win it. The Republicans did not do what the Democrats did. In fact, you had a bunch of people on the right say, we have to stand by him. This could be a lie. This could be not true. No. Even Donald Trump believes the allegations are true and has rejected continued support of Mark Robinson. It continues. The lack of discernment from people on this issue just continues to bother me. On the upside, Senate Republicans are privately telling people they believe that Ohio is suddenly in play, that Bernie Moreno, according to their internal polling, is actually that they had counted him out. They didn't think he could do it. His campaign has turned around. It's closing strong. He has more money in the bank than J.D. Vance did 42 days before the election. The momentum is on his side. Senate Republicans are quietly predicting that the House Republicans will lose the House, but the Senate Republicans will pick up 2 seats, or 3 seats rather, in the Senate for a 52-48 Senate. The House Republicans are begging Donald Trump to do a fundraiser. He hasn't done one, and they are almost out of money, and there are some scandals that have begun to plague them. So very interesting setup where the Republicans may lose the House and gain the Senate. We'll see how it plays out. But Republicans are starting to get confident that they have picked up the Senate, and the House Republicans very nervous that they're going to lose the House if Donald Trump doesn't kick in some money and help them raise some money with donors. When we come back, there's a new survey out. It comes out every few years on what Americans privately think. And it turns out we're very publicly censoring our private thoughts in this country.